Recent events this year have caused chaos in the world market, with a lot of focus on our oil supplies. But another supply shortage also has many concerned and panicked for its impact on agriculture and food supply: urea. As your average dumb American, I find myself wondering, why is so much of our food dependent on Middle Eastern urine supplies? And what makes their urine so important? Well, I'm just flushing mine away. Instead of the usual American reaction to just ignore the headline and move on with my life and hope this doesn't impact me, let's actually be curious, dive in a little bit deeper and see what is actually going on, why it's going on, and explore several ways to address this shortage by making my own fertilizer, and see if I can do my part to help solve the impending food crisis. Because I don't know if anyone has realized this, but if this stuff is in huge demand with spiking prices, I am the goose that lays the golden egg. I make this stuff every day, and then I just throw it away. We could be making millions here. You know, I'm the kind of person who will rebuild an ancient invention from scratch before I'll call a doctor. But a few months ago, that caught up with me. I've been putting off a checkup, partly because I don't know where to start, and partly because calling around, waiting on hold, and trying to figure out which doctor even takes my insurance sounds miserable. Then one morning I woke up feeling awful. That's when I found today's sponsor, ZocDoc. ZocDoc is a free website where you can search and compare high quality, in-network doctors, choose the right one for your needs, and click to instantly book an appointment. And ZocDoc isn't just for one type of care. They have more than 100,000 providers across nearly every specialty, from primary care to dental health, eye care to urgent care to mental health, and more. It's the one-stop shop for your healthcare needs. No need to call the doctor's office and wait on hold either. ZocDoc lets you do everything online. When you found the doctor you need, you can see their actual appointment openings. Plus, ZocDoc helps you get appointments fast, typically within just 24 to 72 hours of booking. And you can even score same-day appointments. You can even read verified patient reviews and see real-time openings. So when you click to book, there's an actual time spot, not a we'll call you back situation. So if you've been putting off that appointment, stop waiting for the right time. Go to ZocDoc.com/HDME to find and instantly book a top-rated in-network doctor today. The closure of the Strait of Hormuz is something that will have ripple effects to global supply chains for years to come. The impact of this with urea fertilizer won't even be truly felt until next year. Beyond oil, urea is another one of the major exports of many Middle Eastern countries in the Gulf, which are now cut off from global trade. Urea is this chemical compound. Its name, this might be a bit of a stretch of imagination, comes from urine and can be chiefly found in the urine of most mammals. It's a full compound with 4 different elements in it, but all we're really after is one element of nitrogen. Nitrogen is one of the big 3 macronutrients for agriculture: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. But of these, nitrogen is probably the most crucial. Nitrogen is critical for forming chlorophyll and is a structural building block for enzymes, proteins, and DNA. Fertilizing with nitrogen is basically the cheat code, allowing a much larger yield from any crop. And the ironic part is that nitrogen is everywhere. It's 78% of the air around us as a gas dinitrogen. Because of its strong triple bond with itself, it's mostly inert, taking tremendous amounts of energy to break it apart. Prior to industrial methods discovered in the 20th century, the majority of nitrogen was extracted from the air by nitrogen-fixing bacteria, who were able to convert atmospheric nitrogen to ammonia with the use of an enzyme, going through a very energy-intensive process. Well, also a small amount is made through lightning strikes, where intense heat and energy breaks the nitrogen bond, allowing it to form new compounds. From these available sources, it gets moved through the nitrogen cycle and passed from plants to animals and back into the earth. For most of human history, the best option for adding nitrogen to your crops was to recycle it from animal waste, including human urine, hence the origin of urea as a fertilizer. As the world approached the 20th century, population growth began to reach the limits of which animal waste could provide. So desperate were they for new sources, the US even went so far as to seize tropical islands just for harvesting guano, with laws like the Guano Islands Act, which authorized any US citizen to seize any unclaimed island they discover with guano found on it. With these demands in the early 20th century, industrial methods of extracting nitrogen from the air were discovered, which completely revolutionized the world, both maximizing our yields and where food can be grown, allowing the world population to increase from 1.6 billion in 1900 to over 8 billion today, which brings everything back to our current situation. As with all of the possible processes, extracting nitrogen from the air is energy expensive. The reason the Gulf states have become some of the largest exporters of urea is because of their large natural gas deposits, a crucial ingredient and source of energy, allowing them to better afford this expensive process. With a significant portion of the world's fertilizer now cut off, demand and prices have increased dramatically, likely forcing farmers to use less fertilizer, which will reduce crop yields, which means less food and higher prices. So let's see what I can do to resolve this. The process that revolutionized the world is called the Haber-Bosch process. It usually starts with some form of fossil fuel, usually natural gas, from which hydrogen gas is extracted and isolated. Under high heat and extreme pressure, with the help of a catalyst, nitrogen and hydrogen gas are combined to form ammonia. Then, to make the commodity easier to transport as a dense solid, it undergoes an extra step of turning it into urea by reacting it with carbon dioxide. This whole process is incredibly energy intensive and today consumes 1 to 2% of energy globally. But this was actually a major improvement from earlier methods that were discovered first. I'm currently working on a large video exploring the evolution of artificial light and the techniques that led up to the light bulb. And the first two major methods of extracting nitrogen from the air are kind of direct offshoots from early light technologies. So I wanted to take a stab at adapting what I'm already kind of working on to see how well I can make my own fertilizer. Both of these technologies are direct offshoots from the developments in electricity and harnessing of electrical arcing, as higher and higher power potentials became available in the 1800s. A journey I've been exploring myself by attempting to construct early batteries and dynamos, and eventually achieving enough power to make my own electrical arcs. And from this came one of the first methods of extracting nitrogen from the air to make fertilizer with the Frank-Karl process. As more and more power became possible with the building of large hydroelectric dams, one method of using this energy was to make a compound called calcium carbide. Calcium carbide is made by taking lime and adding coke and heating it to extreme heat. I've made both of these compounds before. Quicklime is made by baking limestone to over 1500 degrees Fahrenheit, while coke is made by taking coal and heating it to around 1800 degrees Fahrenheit in an oxygen-deprived environment. The challenge then is that calcium carbide formation requires a temperature around 4000 degrees Fahrenheit, which is much hotter than pretty much any traditional furnace can reach. But by harnessing the energy from the electrical arc, you can build an electric arc furnace and achieve temperatures in that range and beyond. Calcium carbide reacts with water to produce acetylene gas, which could then be burned as a light source, perhaps best known for miners' carbide lamps, but is also used in early automobile lights and even domestic lighting in places outside the reach of the early electric grids. Within a few years of carbide's discovery, the Frank-Karl process was also discovered. It involves heating the carbide to over 2000 degrees Fahrenheit in the presence of nitrogen. The result is calcium cyanamide. When you spread it over a field, it decomposes in reaction to water and releases ammonia to the crops. It was one of the first and cheapest nitrogen fertilizers for the time, until later methods were developed that required less energy. I'm still working on an effective method to produce high enough temps to succeed in this process, but let's focus on the nitrogen capturing steps, starting from a store-bought supply of calcium carbide. First crushing it into a fine powder, then I place it into a crucible and heat it to around 2000 degrees Fahrenheit. Supposedly this reaction should work with just exposure to air, but we can improve the results by adding in a flow of pure nitrogen. After heating for about an hour, we should hopefully have a result. The calcium carbide should react with nitrogen to produce calcium cyanamide and carbon. Carbon will be small amounts of black, but for the most part it isn't going to look too different. Looks like I didn't get a full reaction, as some of the calcium carbide was still present and produced gas on contact with water, releasing the flammable gas. So I washed the powder in ice water, which should leave just the calcium cyanamide and carbon behind. A quick test, and we get the expected pH result for ammonia. Success! Next is the Birkeland-Ida process, which directly uses arcing electricity, mimicking the way lightning can decompose nitrogen. In the extreme heat of the arc, dinitrogen breaks down and the nitrogen can form nitrous oxide with the oxygen in the air. It then cools and forms nitrogen dioxide, which then dissolves into water to form nitric acid, which can then be concentrated and reacted with lime to form calcium nitrate, which you can then use as a fertilizer. I first heard of this method many years ago when I first collaborated with Cody's lab. We had a very basic model of it. The industrial model is much more complex and uses things like a spinning magnet to expand the electrical arc into a larger area, along with a continuous flow of air through it. However, even the simple arc sparks I was producing before could achieve this reaction, although in only trace amounts. Let's see if I can build my own and extract a measurable amount of fertilizer from the air.
I experimented with a few different power supplies, trying to maximize the amount of arcing, but had limited success in getting a good sustained arc, so I switched to a high voltage power supply, giving me a weak but continuous arc to leave running. After letting it run for around 5 hours, there was a distinctive drop in the pH of the water, proving that this is actually working. I've managed to make nitric acid from just the nitrogen in the air.
And now on to the fun part. Let's rewind things a little bit further to probably the cheapest way. The simplest way to get nitrogen for fertilizer is to just recycle it from the end of the cycle and return it to the start. So let's follow the cycle. Urea or other nitrogen-based fertilizers are added to the soil. There it forms ammonia, which bacteria turn into nitrates through nitrification. Plants absorb the nitrates and ammonia through the roots and use it for forming amino acids, proteins, DNA, and chlorophyll. When consumed, these proteins are digested and broken down into amino acids, and then used to build and grow nearly everything in your body. But unlike plants, humans have more limits to the growth and require a little bit more of a complex mix of nutrients and energy. So when it comes to humans, you can't just pour excess nitrogen or protein onto a human and expect massive plant-like growth. Instead, any excess nitrogen the body collects actually becomes toxic, as it forms ammonia in the body, a strong alkaline that can start causing damage. So liver packages excess into urea, which is less toxic and can be expelled through urine. The understanding of this actual process and the importance of the nutrient nitrogen to plants was relatively recent, around the 19th century. But understanding the importance of adding animal waste or human waste to crops was understood as early as 8000 BCE, basically since the origin of agriculture. When exploring the process and making items historically, it's hard to go too far before you find processes that end up utilizing urine. Generally, I've tried to avoid these methods that require it whenever possible, but I continuously run into it as a useful method for washing clothes and general cleaning, the dyeing of fabrics with woad, tanning leather, and then gunpowder. And for gunpowder, I've ended up having the fun of messing with bat guano and chicken droppings to make my own nitrates. Interestingly, for that, I was actually after a different element in the compound instead of nitrogen, but actually the oxygen in it to use it as an oxidizer. Ah, poop. So versatile.
The connection between fertilizers and explosives is of course very close, and the Haber-Bosch process arrived just in time to supply the enormous demand for munitions during World War I. The reason nitrogen fertilizers can also serve as effective oxidizers comes down to the nature of the nitrogen atom itself. The tremendous amount of energy required to break the triple bond in dinitrogen leaves nitrogen compounds energetically inclined to return to this more stable state. When nitrogen is converted into compounds like nitrates, it can more easily return to that highly stable dinitrogen form. In the process, these compounds can rapidly release oxygen in large amounts of energy, fueling intense combustion or explosions. This is why nitrate-based compounds have historically been used for both fertilizers and explosives.
But ultimately, urine is one of the easiest sources for making ammonia, a useful compound for manufacturing plastics, pharmaceuticals, explosives, cleaning supplies, and has thus been on my radar for the past 10 years I've been making videos. But I've always been kind of putting it in the back burner, because it's kind of gross. But now it's time to finally do it. Yay.
Urine's composition can vary widely based on your diet, but on average, it's around 95% water. So let's start by boiling it down to remove this excess water. Oh, that's not good. Let's try that again. After water, the biggest composition of urine is urea at 2%. But the coloration mostly comes from urochrome, which is made from your old red blood cells. After boiling down, the color got surprisingly dark very quickly. When significantly reduced, I attempted to concentrate the urea through recrystallization. However, that was not very successful, and was still very brown. So I moved to the historical method urea was first discovered by, and used alcohol as a solvent. Just the urea should dissolve in it, and should be able to collect a relatively pure sample of urea at the end after the alcohol evaporates.
Alright, so now I've demonstrated a few ways to produce urea or urea-adjacent fertilizer products. These scaled-down industrial processes are obviously going to be pretty expensive, I yielded maybe a few grams of nitrogen at the expense of a decent amount of electricity. Rough estimate, my Birkeland IDA process was potentially 6,000 times less efficient than the already inefficient industrial method, meaning it probably cost me $30,000 to make the equivalent of a ton of urea. So I don't think I'll be making a profit there. Recycling urea from urine, however, is a different story. Running some rough math, at the peak price urea reached this year so far at $684 per metric ton, if we were able to extract the majority of urea from the urine of every American, we are looking at a $3 billion in potential annual revenue, which sounds like a lot. Because it is. It actually covers up to a quarter of our annual fertilizer use. But when you split that down to each person, you realize that's about $9 a person, which I don't think is going to be enough to motivate everyone to collect and cover shipping of all the urine for an entire year. My actual extracted urea was about a week's worth of urine. In theory, I should have yielded around 250 grams of urea at the end. However, my extraction method was not the most efficient. Along every step of the way, the urea was turning into ammonia and evaporating out, so my final yield was just over 10 grams of relatively pure urea crystals, which at peak prices this year so far will yield me about 3/4 of a penny. But I hope this has helped improve all of our understanding of everything that goes on. I feel like individual elements of this are relatively common knowledge, but how everything connects in the broader picture is something that gets a little lost. And ultimately that's what this whole channel is about. We live in an incredibly complex world, and it's so easy to not even realize the complexity of what is making it happen. The Haber-Bosch process is probably one of the most important industrial discoveries in human history. Our world would be incredibly different without it. Our population would just be a fraction, and food would likely be much more expensive. But as the continual theme with every invention and new technology, it's a double-edged sword. The process feeds billions, but it also enabled industrial scale explosive production, allowing wars since World War I to be fought with vastly larger quantities of munitions. Today, this formerly difficult to source nutrient of nitrogen now floods the world in it, where only 50% of the fertilizer is actually absorbed by the plant, and the rest runs off and is leached into the environment, where it causes environmental disasters like algae blooms. Recent events prove that nitrogen fertilizer still holds a lot of value and demand. But because these industrial processes make creating new nitrogen affordable, it's not worth the effort of recycling it in large scale from our waste. Some industries are working on recapturing some of this nitrogen from our wastewater, but enormous amounts still end up going into our water supplies, where it only causes more problems. So returning to the starting point, are we facing a disastrous food crisis and shortage? Yes and no. Prices are going to go up, and people at the bottom will inevitably be hurt by it. But I would say that this is more just a break from our cheap agriculture of the past century. It's hard to say we have a fertilizer shortage when we are still flushing so much of it literally and figuratively down the drain. Higher prices just motivate us to actually recapture some of that nitrogen, which is already starting to happen. I hope this was helpful and provided a better understanding of the world. We live in an era of complexity, and it's easy to tune out, and I feel the best thing I can do is try to encourage everyone to look a little deeper and try to understand everything a little better. So I hope this helped. Thanks for watching, and thank you to all my supporters on Patreon.
If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe and check out other content we have covering a wide variety of topics. Also, if you've enjoyed these series, consider supporting us on Patreon. We are largely a fan-funded channel and depend on the support of our viewers in order to keep our series going. Thanks for watching.